try the tools. Some work, some won't work. Some use cases are definitely useful. Some use cases may not be as useful. Think of everything as an experiment, and changing that approach to more learning and experimenting, I think, will go a long way, because in doing so, each of us will find our own, use cases that resonate with us.
What would you do if the very industry you've built your career around suddenly started evolving faster than you could keep up? Welcome to Care to Lead podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Corsetti. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Sonny Patel, a trailblazer in the field of artificial intelligence and an influential leader in the tech industry. Sonny's journey began at Microsoft. From there, her fascination with AI led her to Amazon's Alexa team, where she helped deliver some of its most advanced features. Today, she's the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Socotra, where she's reshaping the insurance landscape using cutting-edge AI tools. Sonny, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here.
Cynthia, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Let's dive right in. AI is labeled as the technology of the future, but you've already emphasized that it's reshaping our present. Do you want to share a moment when you first realized just how profound AI's impact would be on your industry?
Yeah, and my journey goes back almost a decade before ChatGPT, before, Gen AI became the cool buzzword. So my introduction to it was when I was at Amazon, and the dream was to have a personal assistant with us in our lives, wherever we are, within our home, within our cars. Truly an assistant of sorts that moves along with us. Since then, my fascination just simply grew, right? So I can speak a little bit more about my experience working on Amazon Alexa, a bit more, but this was back in 2015, 2016 timeframe. And after Amazon, I worked for a conversational AI company that built solutions for enterprises to manage their relationships with their consumers. So customer engagement software. I was there for almost 5 years before joining Socotra. And during that time, obviously, ChatGPT came forth, the kind of AI tools that were previously accessible for, I would say, a smaller segment of the tech industry have exploded. Now they're at everybody's fingertips. So it's understandable that everybody wants to talk about it.
So what has changed in your personal role right now? You're overseeing a division and people. And what's different now about leading right now that wasn't there a few months ago or a few years ago?
I think it feels to me a bit less focused. The reason I say that is before, because again, there were specific teams designated to work with, to utilize AI to build capabilities, whether they were targeted for other businesses or whether they were targeted for consumers. And there was a purpose behind why those teams were set up and what the goals were. The part that's still the same, I would say, is that it was very much experimentation back then, and I think we're still in this experimentation phase right now. Now, I think the difference is all teams are expected to utilize AI. And that's what I mean by it feels less focused, right? I mean, every technology division, regardless of what space you're in, what solutions you're building, are being challenged to think about utilizing AI. And I don't think that was the case, I want to say, 2-3 years ago. So that's probably the bigger difference. I do think there's good and bad to both ways of doing it. But where it seemed utilizing AI seemed more specialized previously, that specialization is no longer a requirement when a team is working on AI-powered capabilities these days.
I'm curious. One of the things I see as an executive coach, working with executives in a lot of different industries, is that now that AI is in the picture, they're dealing with things that they didn't have to deal with before. Obviously, there's the ethical aspects of using AI and privacy and all of those. But just in leadership itself. In the past, leadership always had to lead through organizational change. They've always had to pivot. They've always had to be ready for the next thing. But with AI, it's like that's on steroids. And so leadership skills that served you well in the past almost need to be revamped. It's almost like an entirely new set of leadership skills that are necessary in industry to keep the team on board with change as rapid as change is happening.
Yeah, and I think that this is where it's an interesting perspective. Cynthia, you're definitely highlighting a good point there, right? I don't want to say that before we didn't worry about it. So one of the features I was working on when I was in working on Amazon Alexa was voice recognition. So the whole idea behind this feature was that typically in majority of cases, Alexa device was used in a multi-user setting. So multiple users were interacting with the same device. And the idea was over time, and each of us have our unique voice prints. Over time, if Alexa could learn to recognize who is speaking to her, even if she doesn't know, oh, it's Cynthia, this voice is Cynthia, this voice is Sonny. She just knows that there's voice 1 and there's voice 2. Over time, she could tailor the responses that she provides. So that was the hypothesis and the concept behind voice recognition. Because each of us have our unique preferences, even for a simple use case, like let's say you and I are roommates, we are talking to the same Alexa. I say, hey, what does traffic look like? And Alexa knows my office is, 20 minutes away, and your office is in a different address. Again, based on who is asking that question, even though it's the exact same question, the response would be tailored. So for a feature like that, really fun, exciting capability to work on. And there were so many aspects of it. One is, let's just talk about privacy, right? There were so many discussions we had at that time, even about how to introduce this feature to users, right? We think this will be an enormous convenience. But one could argue that, Alexa is collecting biometric information about users. How do we, let the users know so they can be in control? Because, the important part was it's not us building the capability thinking this is a cool capability, but it's the users who are actually using it, agreeing that there is value in Alexa recognizing the voices. So just that topic, as simple as it might seem, was probably hours of discussion in terms of how to make the feature discovery available. How do we lend that experience to users that they could turn it off if they don't think this is valuable, or they could turn it back on, or control the level of information that they want to share with Alexa to personalize those responses. So these questions about privacy and the other ones tend to be about, for instance, bias, but, about errors, error rates, in Gen AI, there is this notion of hallucinations, but, even back then, what if Alexa incorrectly recognizes your voice or attributes your voice to somebody else and unknowingly gives them some information about you? All of these were very much debated quite a bit before ever even launching a feature like that to the customers. So these discussions have always existed. So, but like I said, I think they have come more to the forefront because at this point, I think in our day-to-day, all of us are probably interacting with AI multiple times in a day, whether when we call a business for something. And it's just the propagation of utilization of AI has grown so much that these discussions have come more to the forefront.
I agree. It's interesting. I use Alexa in my kitchen all the time. I have it on the Alexa with the recipes and all of that. And every evening when I go in to cook dinner, I'll usually tell her to set a timer. And it got to the point where about 5 o'clock when I go in to start cooking, Alexa will speak up. Good afternoon, Cynthia. Would you like me to set a timer? And I'm like, whoa, that's so creepy. But it's helpful, but it's a little creepy. So, but I think that when and you're in the tech industry, so you know so much more than the average person in another industry who's using the tech.
Mhm.
And I think that that's where I'm saying like leadership has to be different because you know the safety precautions, you know the debate, you know all of those things. But if I'm just Joe running a lawn care service and I want to start implementing AI into my organization, I do have to learn to lead a little bit differently. I have to be able to get my people to not be afraid of the change. I have to be able to get my people to utilize it and learn and be willing to grow and not be afraid it's going to take their job. So all of those pieces, I think, transform leadership as well. What else do you think is important for people who don't have the expertise that you have to know when they're leading their companies?
Yeah, and I think, and there's so much debate about this, right? So the role that AI will play in our society, the impact of the jobs. Based on what I know, my research, my understanding on this topic, I tend to be a bit of a centrist on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, because the two sides of the debate, as you can understand, there's a set of believers that think AI is going to solve scarcity in the world. And then there is the other camp that thinks it's going to demolish humanity. And my views are definitely in the center. So when it comes to that approach to leadership and even the receptiveness to utilize AI, this is not my quote. I don't know where I heard this from, so I'm going to reuse this. That says, AI is not going to replace jobs. People who utilize AI are going to replace the jobs of people who don't utilize AI. And when I heard that, I felt, okay, that's actually very well put. Because AI, with all its promise, I think we're still to see this absolute power that we think AI has, right? I mean, but having said that, there are some scenarios today that AI is so incredibly convenient and powerful that it almost, to me, it feels silly not using it. When we have been handed this gift, why not utilize it to make our day-to-day easier? So for those who are in fear of it, that would be my recommendation is just try it. Just try something simple. I'll give you an example that I was using an AI tool the other day. I had to give a presentation, and in order to prepare for the presentation, I just had to listen to a few of the older recordings to gather my talking points. And in the past, if I had to do it without any of the AI tools, I would have probably come up with the script myself and, fine-tuned it. And with AI, you could simply input videos, past recordings, and it spits out transcripts in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
How, probably saved hours of my preparation time. And we have those type of use cases available to us at our fingertips. And which is why I think we are just so blessed to be living in these times with such conveniences to make our jobs easier, right? And here I go, still putting in quite a bit of time preparing for this presentation. But the hours of grunt work I would have done preparing it is now minimized to minutes. Somebody has done this for me. Right. And now I can focus on truly the value-added piece, which is now that I have this raw script, how do I make it my own? Which would be very difficult for an AI to know, is how do I tell the story? What is my voice? So, and that's one of the many, many examples of AI tools we have at our fingertips. So in terms of that change, how do we change our mindset? Mine is just try it. Try the tools. Some work, some won't work. Some use cases are definitely useful. Some use cases may not be as useful. Think of everything as an experiment, and changing that approach to more learning and experimenting, I think, will go a long way, because in doing so, each of us will find our own, use cases that resonate with us. As a leader, I think it's both ways. One, not thinking about it at all, obviously, is a mistake because it just leaves that space for your competitors to take over. But on the other hand, the overhype also has its gotchas. So it's, as a leader of a technology organization in this time, I definitely feel for a lot of my fellow CTOs, CPOs. How do we strike that right balance where we don't jump on the bandwagon just because it's a cool thing, but at the same time, don't get left behind. How do we really seek out these useful problems to solve and bring that value to whatever it is, that problem space we are working on?
I'm under the impression the insurance industry is kind of known for its being cautious in adopting new technologies. So how did you lead your team through that kind of resistance?
So I wonder if on this topic of Gen AI, if the stance that insurance industry takes might actually pay off. And it's been quite a 360 for me, right? I mean, working on voice assistants a decade ago to, moving in the industry's insurance space where not just AI, every bit of technological innovation there's always observe first, then adopt strategy. And with Gen AI, we've been going through this hype cycle. And I wonder in that, perhaps that wait and watch stance might actually pay off, because now we are truly, things are settling down. We're seeing where the technology really falls from a capability spectrum, and using that to decide where it can be used. But having said that, I do think there's enormous opportunity in the insurance space to utilize AI. Anytime, I mean, this is my belief, anytime there is a human being making a decision, there is an opportunity for AI, not to take over the decision making, but to augment the decision to make that person a much better decision maker. But we are still at the point where we know that AI is not foolproof. It's never going to be 100% right. Well, so are human beings. Like, as human beings, we make mistakes as well. So which is why this is absolutely an area for a great partnership where we bring in both together, and together, hopefully, we make better decisions. I mean, when you talk about insurance, whether it's in issuing a policy, assessing the risk for a particular policy, or reviewing a claim that is being made against an insurance policy, assessing the validity of the claim, or, and also the risk associated with that. Yeah.
What are you most excited about in the world of AI right now, Sonny?
I have two aspects that I think both excite me and worry me.
That was my next question, so good.
So honestly, when I think about the interest that everybody has in AI, and all of us, and especially the technology leaders, I'm sure all of us are being asked to push the boundaries with it. It's truly a gift, right? I mean, we're all being given this opportunity to just experiment and learn. And that always, even if an experiment is not an immediate success, that eventually leads to great outcomes, because that's how we learn, that's how we improve, that's how we learn to push boundaries even further going forward. And because of this interest that exists in the industry, we're all being asked to do it. So great opportunity, in my opinion. So that's the exciting part. The other side of it, I have 3 children, 7, 4, and 1. So my 7-year-old, so he has an Alexa in his room. It's very just interesting to watch how he interacts with Alexa, how kids in general, I think they just are growing up in a completely different world. And the way they interact is just so different from at least I have ever interacted with devices. So a personal, I guess, delightful moment for me was, so my son just randomly talks to Alexa as if she's this, presence in the room. And one day he comes to me and he says, "Oh, Alexa knows who I am." I said, "What do you mean?" So he said, I asked Alexa, I said, "Alexa, who am I?" And then she said, "Oh, she can recognize me and she can ask me to repeat a few things." And this was exactly the feature I had built when I was at Alexa. So for my son to discover that feature on his own without any prompting, and then he was so excited that Alexa was getting to know him, it's like, it just took me aback. And I got to tell him, I was like, "Hey, mommy built that feature." So, and he now thinks I built all of Alexa, but anyways, I had to. I said no to that particular Alexa feature. I do think in a lot of ways, it's just fascinating to me, both the amount of learning we are doing at work as well as, the world we're leaving for our kids, if you're an optimist, in terms of what this can do for their own education, it can do for their own learning, right? So that is in my opinion, the exciting part, or where I think there's a lot of exciting possibilities for the future.
Something you said there intrigued me on just how you see your child interacting. Do you have any examples of how you see kids interacting with technology today and what you see happening in the future? Because I think that's really interesting.
Oh man, Cynthia, I think that's such a fascinating topic, right? So the way I use a device, right? And I really pay attention to it just because, back when we were building these capabilities in all of the companies I worked on, we spent so much time discussing discoverability of features. Is that how would somebody find out that this capability exists? And how would they learn to use XYZ feature, right? When building as a product builder, this is something we paid a lot of attention to. There was, design discussions, there was discussions about, what is the problem we're solving. And I think a lot of the times the way I use a technology is me first learning about the technology, then understanding how should it be used. So a lot of, for example, like how I use a personal assistant or I use any of the tools that I use is based on me learning about the tool, learning how to use it, and then I use it that way. I think kids are very different in terms of how they use. They just have this intuitive sense. So this notion of using natural language to interact with things around them is just so ingrained because that's the only thing they know. So they, in fact, are much natural users of some of these technologies, because their first instinct is to just ask using the language that they know. Again, when you think about when Alexa was born, before that, it was all commands or menus or tapping on buttons. And we had to learn that, now there is this device where you can just talk naturally. And at the beginning, it wasn't even that natural. We had to improve the technology. But for kids, that's the default mode. And it's always interesting for me to just see how they work around some of their limitations. So this was when my son was younger and he couldn't spell correctly. He figured out that he could just, hit on the microphone button, whether this is on TV to play a show that he wanted, or whether he wanted to send a message to us. He very quickly understood that, I don't have to actually type. I can just use the microphone button and speak to it naturally. So it's just, when I see these things, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like all mothers. I'm like, oh, my kid is a genius. But I think all kids are that way.
Well, it's like just such a different world. And it's like even 20 years from now, you've got to wonder, this is going to be like the dark ages for your kids. They're going to look back and say, do you remember when we had to do this?
Or when I tell my son that growing up, I did not have a phone and he thinks it's just unbelievable. He's like, you didn't have a phone with you the whole time? I was like, no, Yeah,
I think I think about parents and like how parents raised kids without cell phones. Like I know when my kids were in high school, I'm like, FaceTime me. I want to know really where you are. I want to see the FaceTime, and it doesn't I don't know how they did it before that. It's scary. So let's lighten things up and get to a lightning round. I'm going to ask you just some quick personal questions that you can just answer quickly just to let our audience know a little bit more about Sonny. Ready?
Sure.
What's one piece of technology you cannot live without?
Oh, wow. Cliched, but my phone.
Your phone. Okay. Best book you've read recently?
Oh, recently. I'm late to the party, but a recent book I read, which I absolutely loved, is Adam Grant's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, yeah. Thinking Fast and Slow is Kahneman.
Oh, Kahneman. Oh,
Daniel Kahneman.
That's right. Thanks for Yes.
It's a great, great book.
Yes. I mixed up my authors, right. It's and it's been there forever. I've heard such great things about it. And I think it showed up on my Kindle deals one day and I was like, okay, let me read it. Oh man, like definitely has had a very huge impact.
Yeah, it's a great book. So if you weren't in the tech world, what career would you have chosen?
I would probably teach.
What would you teach? That's not one of the questions, but I'm going to throw it in there anyway. What would you teach?
I don't know if I have the skill set for this at all, but I would have loved to teach computer science to, college students.
Oh, cool. And are you a morning person or a night owl?
I used to be a night owl. I think as I'm getting older, I'm becoming more of a morning person.
I think that's how it works. You just want to get up and be productive. What's your go-to strategy for unwinding after a long day?
I'd probably be curled up in bed with a book with some hot tea.
That's perfect. So as my listeners already know, Care to Lead is my signature leaderships program, and it's built on the foundations of clarity, authenticity, responsibility, and engagement. So that being said, I ask all of my guests a closing questions about one of the pillars. And Sonny, which pillar resonates most deeply with you, and how have you seen it play out in your leadership journey?
I would probably say, and all of them great, but I would probably say authenticity. And it's, to me, something I had to learn as I grew up and built more experience at the workspaces. We can all just only be ourselves. We can never emulate somebody's style, even though we're inspired by them or we admire somebody. And when we choose to show up as ourselves, I think that is probably the best thing we can do as leaders, because that is probably going to be the most convincing or the best way to make an impact and influence other people.
Is there anything in closing that we haven't covered that you would like to share with our audience?
No, this is a great conversation. Again, thank you so much for having me over.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And to our listeners, remember, leaders who care to lead.